So this is the milk glue experiment. We're going to make glue from milk. So what you need in front of me here, I've got a mini cooker, one of these tabletop cookers. It's actually on right now there. You can feel the heat coming up. Of course, be really sensible when you do this one for obvious reasons. We're using a cooker, grown-ups around, all the rest of it. Best place is in the kitchen, of course, to do this experiment, I would say anyway. You need a milk saucepan, a pouring saucepan, one of these small ones. Best to use one with a little spout on the side, it's easier to do. And a few more bits and pieces you can see here. I have 250 millilitres of whole milk. 250 millilitres of whole milk, that's like full cream milk. I've got another spare jug, I'll be using that in a minute. I've got some water in here, about 60-70 ml of water. I've got some vinegar, baking soda, a sieve, some stirring things, and a couple of brushes. And you're going to see what this is all for. First thing I want you to do is take your milk pan and I want you to pour in your measured milk into the pan. Okay, that's the first thing I want you to do. Okay, now we're going to use that jug in a second to keep it to hand. Okay, then I want you to pour in a couple of teaspoons of vinegar. So in fact 4 teaspoons of vinegar in this case. Now of course when you pour from a spoon it's very difficult to get it exact because it often flows off the side, so it's approximate. Do your best to get about 4, okay? So 4 teaspoons of vinegar in this particular case. I've given you a hint there about a variable, by the way. So 4, okay? So, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Leave that there. Stirring implement onto the heated hot plate and stir, and you must keep stirring constantly for this one, okay? So stay close and keep stirring. Now of course we're heating up the contents, the milk and the vinegar, and within seconds, right now in fact, something interesting started to happen. We've gone very lumpy. I'm not sure how well you can see it from here, but it's gone very lumpy, rather peculiar. We've got all these little pale coloured lumps in almost clear liquid. Very quick, isn't it? Very quick indeed. So that's the first part of the experiment. I think you'll agree it's pretty straightforward. Okay, now what we want to do is separate out the liquid from the lumpy bits. Now again, please be careful, lots of heat going on here. I'm going to use this jug because it doesn't matter about the liquid, I'm not interested in liquid right now. So I'm going to pour that through the sieve and get all my lumpy bits. Okay, I'll finish with that. I'm going to put it on the cold side of the cooker and I'll leave that there out of the way safely. Right, so now remember I'm not interested in the liquid here, so I'm going to put that out of the way in a minute. But what I do want to do is I want to pour these little lumpy bits, and it's quite hot of course, so be careful if you're doing what I'm doing. This is cool enough for me to touch it, and I'm just going to put it in here, okay? So let's leave that to the side somewhere. Okay, jolly good. Now, I'm just going to break it up with my spoon, and spread it around in the bottom. Interesting stuff. What I now want to do is pour on the water. Remember, it's between 50 and 75 millilitres of water. So pour on the water and then add a heaped teaspoon of nicely powdered baking soda. Nicely powdered baking soda. Now this is quite a small spoon. Oops. So I might add a little bit more. Let's see what happens with this one. Now, I think I'll turn the cooker off while I'm here. It started to fizz. Some bubbles being made. Not sure how well you can see that, but it's starting to go a bit bubbly. I'm going to stir it a bit with my spoon. I'm not sure if you can see that very well in my one, but it's lots of tiny little bubbles are forming. In fact, I can actually hear it. You probably can't hear it. I can hear it fizzing a bit, just a tiny bit, just within the threshold of my hearing. I can hear something fizzing. Yeah, definitely. So maybe listen out for that when you do it. You probably can't hear it when I'm doing it. Now this is a pretty lumpy, clumpy stuff. I'm using my spoon to mash it around a bit. I'm just going to stir it just for a little bit longer. So I'm going to mash it around. I want to really break the lumpy stuff up that I poured out of the pan. I want to break that up into little bits really, because it makes it easier for this all to happen. So do what I'm doing. It's good stuff. Ooh, definitely still fizzing around a bit. You want to keep doing this until most of the fizzing has stopped. Okay, so keep doing it until the fizzing you can see and hear usually as well, but certainly keep an eye on it. That's what you want to watch. Make sure you keep moving this around until the fizzing has largely stopped. Now of course, while I'm moving it around with the spoon, it's not easy to see that, so every now and again stop and have a little look at the surface and look for bubbles and see if you can see any bubbles being made. Now, I can see the odd little bubbles now and again, so I'm going to leave it just a few more minutes, okay? Just a few more minutes. So I'm going to move it around a bit more. I'll give you one little clue. There's a chemical reaction going on here, and by moving it around like this, it's helping the chemical reaction a bit. Now remember the name of this experiment, milk glue. So we've actually made some milk glue, but let's test it. Just give it a little bit longer. It's still fizzing. Because mine still looks a bit frothy on the surface, so that's obviously a clue that it's still fizzing. Remember, froth is just tiny, tiny little bubbles. There's a bit of froth there. I'm just going to give it another minute or two. Now I suggest when you do it, make sure you leave it totally until all the fizzing has stopped as far as you're concerned. Now that can take a little bit longer, but I'm going to go with it now. I'm fairly happy that that's got to where I want it to go. So what I now need to do is find something to test my glue on. Now, let me see. I'm just going to wipe my table because I don't want to get this vinegar on things I'm going to stick together. And I've finished with that now for a minute and all my other bits and bobs. So what I'm going to do, actually, if I put the glue there, because remember this is glue now, I'm going to get some sheets of paper. This is just ordinary paper, okay? I'm going to lay one piece there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint with one of my brushes, just paint a bit of the stuff onto the paper, a bit like it's glue. In fact, it might remind you, if you've ever seen anybody doing any decorating, the way they put paint on wallpaper. Not paint, they put glue on wallpaper, don't they? They sometimes put paint on the outside, of course, but when they're putting it on the wall, they put glue on it to stick it there. Now, I don't know if this is true, by the way, but someone told me they used to use this sort of glue in the olden days to stick wallpaper on walls. I don't know if that's true though, and I've never checked. You should always check things like that when people tell you. Now I'm going to use this brush for this one, okay? So I'm just going to dab the brush in the glue. I'm just going to, it's a bit lumpy right now, but remember I said I haven't left mine. Mind you saying that, I've done a bit of wallpapering in my time, and often wallpaper paste is a bit lumpy actually when you put it out. At least when I did it, maybe it isn't what it was meant to be like. I'm just going to spread it around. I think I should have cleaned this brush a bit first, shouldn't I? So just spread it around. I don't think I'm quite as professional as a decorator on this one. Mind you, they probably got better brushes than me for doing wallpaper. So just try and spread it about the same thickness over the surface you're using. That'll do. And what I'm going to do now is lay another piece on top. Doesn't have to match perfectly. And we make a glue sandwich So I don't recommend eating this one particularly, to be honest with you. And try and flatten it out as best you can. Now of course it will take a bit of time to dry, so this will take a little while. It will depend how warm it is in the place that you're going to do this. But what you do need to do is let it dry right off. And notice that's all gone crinkly and wrinkly here. That's because the paper's wet. And it's expanded actually. That's why it goes all wrinkly like that. When anything expands, it tends to go wrinkly when it's paper. So we're going to leave that to dry for a little while. And then we're going to come back and see how good this particular glue is. But of course you're going to be doing the same thing. I want you to do the same things you saw me do, repeat everything the same, and we'll compare each other's glue to see how good it is. Good luck. So, milk glue, remember what I asked you to do? Stick 2 pieces of paper together. This one we've only left it an hour or so, may not be totally dry, but it will do what I want it to do. And anyway, I'm hoping you've already done this. So this is what mine done, okay? So I'm gonna see how well it grips them. Look, I know you can't see the force I'm using, but I'm pulling quite hard. Well, remember, it wasn't totally dry either. But I think you'll agree, even though you couldn't see the force I was using, I think you can see I was actually giving it a bit of a tug, and you could tell by the properties and the movement of the paper that I was giving it a good old tug. So that was actually doing a pretty good job, even though it wasn't totally dry. Of course, had I left it a bit longer, interesting variable. What's going on? Now in this experiment, you've made something which used to be called casein glue. You've made like a homemade version of it, and by the way, we still use this in some types of white glue, white PVA glue. They still mix this in on some types. So what's going on? I'm going to have to cut back a little bit to some of the things you did. Now remember, we put some acid in whole milk, we heated the whole milk, we stirred it about a bit, it went all lumpy, and then we poured that through a sieve. We got rid of the liquid, we weren't interested in that, we wanted those little lumps. Now that first part you'd made are curds, the lumpy bits, and the whey was the liquid that we didn't want. Heard of curds and whey? I'm not going to go any further with that one, you might see one of my other experiments. Now milk is mostly made of protein, but there are other things too. The protein stuff is mostly, you could see it in the curds, that lumpy white creamy stuff, that's the curds. And most of the protein that we got from our little experiment was in there. The whey, the liquid, there's a little bit of protein in there, but it's more sugary, lots more water of course. But we're interested in the protein for this experiment, and the main protein in milk is called casein. Okay, now when we did all that experiment right at the start with the vinegar and so on, we got the casein out, but I wanted you to do a bit more if you remember. And what I did was I mashed it down with my spoon, poured some water in, put some baking soda in. I wanted to add a bit more of an alkali, because that's what baking soda is, it's an alkali, a base. And the alkali released a bit more of the casein from the curds, those lumpy bits. It released it a bit more. And do you remember when I was stirring it with the spoon, it was bubbling a bit? Hopefully it did the same for you. And that's the chemical reaction that was taking place between the baking soda solution, the water had made the solution, and the casein in the curds, and it was breaking it down. And that released it into the liquid. So we had that sort of thick, pasty liquid. And then I used my brush and I just paste it over. So the casein itself has what we might call adhesive properties. When we can use it to stick things together. It sticks to itself pretty well by what we might call cohesion, but it sticks other things together pretty well too, as you saw. And so you just made casein glue. Now there's a number of variables. I'm just going to give you a couple to think about. The first we could think about, of course, is right back early part of the experiment. Think of the amounts of stuff we were using. Do you remember we had 250 millilitres of milk, for example. We had 4 rather generous teaspoons of vinegar. We mixed them in. Then we put the water in. Then we put the baking soda in. Any one of those things you could change to see the effect. But remember, whatever you change, you try and keep everything else the same. Otherwise it's not a fair test, so just change one thing at a time. That's the most obvious thing for you to think about. I'm going to leave you to see if you can figure out anything.